once you have a tree that you want to use, or a plant for that matter, it's usually necessary to make a Vray proxy out of it, especially if you're going to be using more than one of that tree in your scene. What Vray proxies do is they take the mesh of this tree, which is again almost 1 million polygons, and they save it to an external file called a VR mesh. And then in here they will just put a proxy for that external file, meaning the external file isn't actually in here, there's just something that kind of represents it. And so you can display it as at a maximum of, well, you can set how many polygons you want it to display as, but at default it's 10,000. So you'll only see 10,000 of the 1 million polygons here, so it'll kind of look like the tree, or you can just display it as a box. But the important part is when you render, or, well, if you take that proxy and copy it all around your scene, it's using memory as if it's only one file, because it's all referencing that same file, kind of like an XREF if you're familiar with those. But it saves you a ton of memory and enables you to render this 1 million polygon tree as many times as you want without crashing your computer. So you could have 2,000 copies of this thing, and that would make 2 billion polygons total. But if it's proxied, it should make it render with ease. If it wasn't proxied, 2 billion polys in your scene would be ridiculous. You wouldn't be able to navigate around in your scene, and you probably couldn't get it to render. So proxies are important with high polygon stuff like this. So this video is going to be dedicated to showing you how to proxy something. First of all, you have to make sure everything is in Edit Poly. So if you Control A to select all, convert to Edit Poly. Then you're going to want to isolate everything that you want to be a part of that same object, that same tree. In this case, it already is that way. So let's select the trunk, and then we'll hit Attach for this polygon, but we'll hit the dialog box here, which attaches a named list if you so choose. So it'll bring up the name of everything that's visible in our scene right now. If we select both of those and hit attach, that will attach everything in the scene to the trunk and create one polygon, which is what we want for our Vray mesh file or our Vray proxy. We want to choose this, match material IDs to material. What that does is keep the different materials here and just collapses them into a multi-sub-object material like I showed you before in the material videos. So hit OK with the first option. And then we wait. One thing I like to do to my proxies before I actually proxy them is make sure the pivot is in the spot I want it. So if again we go into the hierarchy tab, affect pivot only, then we can move the pivot down here. The reason I put it here is so that when I scale that tree, this point stays idle and the tree gets bigger from there. Now we're all ready to proxy it. So if we right click, Vray Mesh Export is what we want. It'll bring up these options. We want to make sure to automatically create proxy, and that will replace this tree with its proxy, which is good. In this case, faces in preview, we'll leave that at 10,000. We can name it, let's see, it's already named, it's going to name it after the name of that particular object, and then we just need to tell it where to save the mesh to. Now that I've chosen and browsed to the proper folder where I want to save this to, and remember you don't want that to ever move once it's saved there, now I can hit OK, and it will take, Vray will take its time to make a proxy. Okay, that's what the proxy looks like. So it's minimized it down to 10,000 polys. Inside that proxy, if you go into the modifier, it's referencing the file right here that we saved out. We can change the display to a bounding box like that. That's what takes up the least amount of memory and video card power. Preview from file is what we were doing. Preview from file faces. Point. That doesn't really make sense to me, but I use these two here. Preview from file. Okay, so now that is our proxy. When we bring it in, it will reference the entire mesh, even though it looks like this. So you can save that out and use it over and over in your scene, and it will work really efficiently. It's really the only way to render scenes with tons of trees. So that's another reason that V-Ray is awesome.